Hey, Mark, welcome back to the show. As a way of getting started, give us an update.
Hey, Brian, good to see you and good to be back on your program again. So a lot of exciting things happening in my world. I've just published a book called called Blind Spots, and I'm hoping we can get to that today in your show. Still doing a lot of funnel principle selling, training, and coaching and consulting. There's still a big need in my space, the small to medium-sized businesses, for people to have systems, methods to drive revenue, to have visibility to their pipeline, and then to act on it, not just to have that visibility, but to know what to do with it. So life's good, still making an impact with a lot of clients doing that. But Blind Spots is a new thing, and I'm excited to tell your audience about it today.
Well, let's dig into it. What was the impetus for it? What caused the creation or the idea for the book?
Great question. Because I think it's a great question because it was a fall, okay? And as it is in life, we often have to fall. We have to stumble hard in order to really learn and grow and really become new people. And as it was for me, I was living a really good life, traveling around the world with good clients, paying me good money to go to exotic places, doing funnel principle training and coaching. And frankly, I became really impressed with myself, okay, over the years of doing that. And I let my ego kind of get away from me, put everything candidly, put everything behind me. I'm a driven guy. I'm still a driven guy. I've still got lots of things I want to accomplish. But there's a line there between healthy driven and really selfish, unhealthy driven. And I crossed that line. And so when I became aware of that, I had to look myself in the face in the mirror and say, basically, I had become somebody that I wasn't proud of. And that was tough. So over the next couple of years, as Richard Rohr would say, I did a lot of shadow boxing. And it took me a few years to get to the bottom of this and really to own it.
Yeah.
And to not, commit harakiri, right? I mean, it's like, there's still a life for me beyond this really selfish world I've been living. So that resulted in me then seeing the blind spots. Okay, I had blind spots. That resulted in me seeing the blind spots of my clients. That resulted in me introducing them to this idea of blind spots. And my story stopped a lot of people dead in their tracks because I opened up. These are clients. They're paying me to help them be better coaches and leaders. And I'm telling them how I fell hard and and they're like, wow, that's really interesting. What it was, Brian, was a lot of people being able to relate, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody's got, for me, it happened in Singapore. Okay. I won't go into it, but my down moment that started
I
this
read
was
about it.
Singapore. Okay. Well,
Oh,
okay.
geez.
There it is. It's in the book. It's in the book.
Yeah.
So everybody has a Singapore moment, I like to say, right? I've got a friend right now who's got some marital issues and he's going through a Singapore moment, and he'll emerge if he allows this to happen, he'll emerge on the other side of this really, really deep valley. A stronger guy, a better man. He's a consultant. He'll be a better consultant. So I've been doing more and more of this blind spots type of coaching then with my clients. I've never had more fun in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, I love funnel principle, and I believe we've made an impact. It doesn't compare to the impact I'm having with people. And so that's what I'm doing.
So let's define what is a blind spot in the context of the book.
Sure. So a blind spot is behaviors that you don't know you commit, okay, that prevents you from creating an emotional connection with somebody.
Okay.
All right. So that's a problem because if you lead a team, you take a sports analogy, right? We overuse them, but they're pretty good most of the time. If you have a team of people, whether it's a youth soccer, if it's professional football, whatever, if you don't emotionally connect, then your players are not going to give you everything they have to give.
Right.
As it is with a sales team. If you have a sales leader, think about sales leaders you've worked for in the past.
Oh,
yourself,
I think a few.
okay. And you probably think of those maybe that you didn't emotionally connect with, and those hopefully that you did. You would have done anything for these people, and you did work really hard, and you benefited in that. So maybe it's obvious why that's important to emotionally connect. So blind spots prevent leaders from creating those emotional connections. And that's a
So,
problem.
so let me make sure I understand. I'm interpreting it as this blind spot is blocking the communication and the trust between the manager and the team players. And what ends up happening, and you can tell me if I'm right or not, is that you end up playing Office Space instead of working.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
No,
You
that's
don't.
true.
Yeah, they're asking, "What's your gut feel about the deal?" And you're telling them what they want to hear versus the truth. Because if you tell them the truth, you're going to go down this rat hole that isn't going to help you.
Maybe so. Let me give you a
Yeah,
couple of examples
please.
because that'll help. So what I do, clients hire me to listen to the coaching conversations between their frontline managers and their salespeople. Typically, that's a funnel audit, 60-minute conversation that we've taught them to do, but it can be some other conversations too. So I hear a salesperson on one of these who's excited about a new meeting he just landed with a prospect that he's been chasing down for probably 6 months, right? And I'm listening, three-way
Yeah,
call, I'm listening, and I'm getting all jacked up, okay? But I
yeah.
don't say anything because my role is to listen.
Listen. Yeah.
Um, and I'm hoping the manager goes, fantastic, Frank, that's great. Great. Hey, what a lesson in persistence. Or, okay, hey, you know what? Let's make sure we got a great call plan for this guy. When's the meeting, right? Didn't get that. Instead, I got, we're on the phone, so I got silence, reflection, and then the manager says, is it on your funnel? And I wanted to leap through the phone and say, man, did you miss that by a mile? Now, your listeners might say, okay, yeah, I've done that before. Is that really a big deal? I'm saying that when that happens week after week after week after week, and other blind spots like that where you're not connecting with your people, yes, it's a big deal, right? Because at the end of the day, we really do, even the hardest core salespeople who you think don't have an emotion in their body, they're just so driven. They want to work for somebody. They want to follow a leader that they believe in. And when you don't emotionally connect with your people, then they can end up leaving because they're just not getting what they need.
So what I heard there was the manager only cared about their vantage point. Was it in the pipeline so that
Yeah.
they could manage it?
Yes.
Right. They weren't adding
Yeah.
value. They weren't giving feedback. They weren't congratulating. They weren't connecting, because
Right.
what you really want to do is, well, how'd you get that? What changed?
Yeah.
How to go? Tell me about it. Where you going
Right.
next with it?
Feed it, give it energy. Mike
Yeah.
Bosworth, I attended a seminar Mike gave. He wrote a book,
Yeah.
What Great Leaders Do, What Great Salespeople Do, back in 2010. And he was selling his storytelling product. Okay.
Yeah.
And I sat through a 3-day seminar that Mike personally delivered up in Minneapolis. And he talks about tending the story. So we've all, as salespeople, we've now been dipped in this value of storytelling, right? You can go and get trained in how to tell good stories. But part of that storytelling he showed us was tending stories. So how well you listen. It's like, I have this really selfish part about me. It's not a blind spot because I know it. Okay. When somebody asks me a question, I'm expecting that they're interested in hearing the answer. And
Or solving a problem, maybe.
I don't mean a 15-minute answer because somebody needs to cut me off too. But it's like, okay, are you engaging? Are you connecting with me, right? And so when people will ask me something that they're interested in, whatever it is, right? Cocktail party, networking event. I'm really good one-on-one because I love to connect with people and all that. So when somebody doesn't do that to me, immediately it's like, I'm not feeling it. This guy just asked me a question, or she just asked me a question, and I'm just not feeling like I want to continue the conversation. Let me give you another example. I'm in a conference room coaching a sales manager, and her boss kind of barges into the conference room and looks at her and says, you caused me to miss my number this quarter. And then goes into a little bit of, not good kind of, conversation about how that upset him and how that's going to affect the business. I kind of wanted to crawl under the table because it was kind of random. It was in the middle of something we were doing. And to me, that's a blind spot because that guy, he's a client of mine too. I know he deeply cares for his manager, And I know that he wants her to understand why the number was missed and what she has to own up to that. And I know he wants her to not miss the number next quarter. So isn't there a better way to have that conversation than the way he had it? I believe the answer is yes. I had another client of mine in a coaching session. Just he volunteered. He said, my dad was hard on me and my brother when we were growing up. He told us we would never amount to anything. And I'm saying, what kind of father does that? That's not motivating. That's mean language in the most intimate kind of relationship, a parent and a child, right? Do I believe he meant harm to his? Yeah. I don't believe he did. I believe it was a blind spot for him to think that somehow that was going to motivate. So my client turned out pretty good. The brother didn't turn out very good. This is a mid-50s-year-old guy who drugs, alcohol, couldn't keep a job. Was it because of the way his dad treated him? I'll let you guys decide. So there are things you say tangibly. There are things that you say that you shouldn't say to your salespeople, to the people you interact with. There are also things that you don't say that you should say to them, to feed them, to nurture them, to create in the spirit of creating that emotional connection.
And can we find our own blind spots, or do we have to have people point them out?
Yeah, good question. It helps. One of the chapters in the book, I quote a guy who's part of my men's group at the church I go to. And he says, I live in a nice suburb, Dublin, Ohio. It's a very high class place in
been there.
Columbus, Ohio. And he has this famous saying to all of the guys who join the men's group at the church. He says, you can't make it in Dublin, Ohio by yourself. And everybody's like, what do you mean? I mean, I got a nice house. I drive a nice car. I shop at Whole Foods. I got a good job. What do you mean? We know what you mean. We know what you mean, Mark. I mean, you need a community of people that you can go to who can pull these blind spots out of you, be candid with you, but there's got to be that trusting relationship. And it's not, I'm a guy of faith, but it doesn't have to always be a faith journey. But I think it absolutely, we talk about faith, spirituality. It has to be a spiritual journey. Okay. If you're not into faith, that's okay. It's got to be a spiritual journey. And if you can come to that conclusion on your own, something magical has happened. And if you can't, then you probably need the help of somebody or a good book that you've read that just kind of rocks you.
Yeah. And so let's say you find it. How do you fix it?
Well, finding it, it's almost like the alcoholic who says, I am an alcoholic.
They have to admit
that's
to
a pretty damn good first step. Okay. And if you're familiar with the 12-step program, one of the next ones has to be, you have to admit that you reach a point of your own helplessness. You can't do it on your own. So I think the next step for me has been to not think that I'm the smartest guy in the room, to ask more questions. Sales managers, you may know how to do something, but your job is not necessarily to tell. So maybe the know-it-all sales manager needs to ask better questions. Maybe the know-it-all sales manager needs to stop talking over top of their salespeople and cutting to some chase and making time for the learning to happen. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we know we're all pinched. So I think it helps to have somebody who can be a mentor, a guide, a coach for you on this journey, because it's really hard, if not impossible, to do it on your own. So maybe the next step is to submit, get a coach, or seek advice from somebody within your company, outside of your company. How can I be a better, more effective leader of my salespeople?
Now, the most of the ones that I've seen have to do with this inner mindset versus outer mindset, meaning that they view the world self-centered instead of what the other person is thinking. And so I'd say, like, number one would be bad listener. Would you agree with
Absolutely.
that? Yeah.
Bad listener. And then if you cut behind that, why is someone a bad listener? Maybe because they think they've already got the answer. Maybe. Okay. Let me go down the list, right? Yeah. Maybe they don't have the patience to hear the answer.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't think they have time. Maybe they don't see that that's their role. Maybe they don't see, when you ask a sales manager, what is your role? I think we'd get a lot of different answers. And there may be a lot of there's complexity to it. Okay. But maybe they see a slice of the role and they're not seeing the wholeness of the role.
Yeah.
Right. So let me be clear too about something. Sometimes people will think that this is like, okay, getting in touch, guys, getting in touch with your feminine side, working on your softer skills, chilling out. And that can be what it looks like, on the surface. But what it really is it's admitting that there's something about you that may not be as effective as you think it is. And for example, I get into conversations with my clients all the time about somebody who probably needs to go. Henry Cloud, one of my favorite books, Necessary Endings. I get a lot of managers who struggle to create the necessary ending to send somebody on their way to somewhere else where they can be successful doing something else, right?
Yeah.
And, the world needs compassion and empathy when you do that. But what the business needs is a salesperson who comes to that conclusion faster. I help them come to those conclusions faster all the time. To me, that's an act of mercy to tell somebody, after a lot of thinking, you don't fit here.
Right.
You have to go somewhere else. So I think that's part of blind spots as well, too.
And do you see the manager who doesn't understand what leadership is, that they look at it as pure management, accounting, operations, as opposed to how to do the job, using judgment and skills instead of just the dashboard jockeys?
I think so. I think so. In fact, it's so interesting, Brian, that you say that, because the first title of my book was the transparency of something or other. And I'm like, who the hell is going to buy a book like that? But the source of that was, as I looked at all my clients, everybody's got CRM nowadays, and everybody's going to big data, and everybody wants the analytics. And what that's done, and what I've seen in my small world, is, frankly, it's squeezed out coaching conversations. It's like, get to the numbers. Tell me why your funnel looks the way it does. Tell me why this is not happening. I don't have a lot of time. I got to get on to something else because the data tells me everything I got to know. And so coaching, don't really have time for that. Go sell something. So to me, all of the data stuff has been, to me, ironically, the transparency, right? The transparency has not allowed us to see what's happening right in front of us. So yes, I believe that's happening.
The data has just created a bunch of actors, meaning, like I heard this discussion about win rate. Well, if you want to increase win rate, work on less deals. That's all you have to do. You're not generating more revenue.
Yeah.
You're just making the manager see what he wants to see. 300% of pipeline. How many times have we heard that? It trickles down. Everyone makes it up. That's not data. That's crap. Right. And I see everyone's going to this AI and data. And like, as soon as you tell a rep how you judge them, they're going to represent it that way.
Right. A smart rep. Absolutely. It's like
you'd be stupid not to.
Yeah.
And if a rep says that guy doesn't bring anything to my game, this is what I heard my whole career. I had probably 2 out of 20 managers that were worth anything. And all of a sudden, all the reps would just avoid the manager. Mm-hmm. And the manager was just a spreadsheet jockey, now a dashboard jockey, and is not adding any value. And that person's getting paid a ton of money to do an entry-level bookkeeper's job.
That's a good way to put it.
Right? It's like,
and you roll that
someone
up,
$50K
right?
to do that.
Why is he doing that? He's doing that because the person he reports to says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go through the forecasting fire drill every 30 days, every 22 business days.
30 minutes.
Every quarter or whatever, or every week, right? Yeah. As opposed to, I want you spending time with your people in the field, doing what sales managers used to do 15 years ago.
Right.
I know it's not that simple, but in a way it is that simple. So we got to find a way through that. So you're absolutely right. I think it's a leadership thing. It's a role thing, how sales managers need to see themselves. I think it's a senior leadership. They tell these people, frontline managers, this is what I need from you. They say one thing, they do another, right? So they're not exercising good leadership to tell their frontline managers to coach, spend time with your people, develop them, et cetera, et cetera.
And let's say you have a client or a friend, even maybe somebody you already have trust and rapport built with, and they have a blind spot that is limiting their life. And if you broke through it, and I always have this, I had an engineer on my team who had a body odor issue,
Okay.
and it was interfering with his success. And
Okay.
it was just somebody who, lived by himself, wore the same shirt every day. And I literally had to take him aside one day and say, I'm not saying this to hurt your feelings. I'm saying this to help you.
Hmm.
And it's going to hurt, but it's not big.
Right. Right.
And he cried
Yeah.
and he didn't talk to me for a couple of days. But a week later, he thanked me. And he
Okay. Yeah.
goes, I talked to my parents. And they go, you should thank that man.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
wisdom, right?
yeah,
But
because
the way you handled it, I mean, I could see 8 other ways people would handle that, and it wouldn't be the right way to handle it.
it was probably
I
too
mean, that's
abrupt, but
no, I think it sounded like you handled it well. I mean, so you're exactly right. I mean, we own it. If I get paid, which makes it easier for me to talk to somebody about their blind
motive, yeah,
spots, right? Versus, let's say, a friend of mine who's not paying me to be a friend or to coach him, right? And I have to say
voluntary.
something to him. So I think, nudge kind of a popular thing, right? I mean, you give people hints, you give people little things. I'm a 3/8 on the Enneagram, if you're an Enneagram guy, right? So I'm an in your face. I want people to tell me, Mark, you stink. Go change your t-shirt. I won't be offended. I will go change my t-shirt. Okay. But not everybody's wired that way.
Yeah.
So again, back to leadership, you know, if you ask sales managers, your team, not everybody's like you on your team, right? I think 9 out of 10 would say, well, yeah, I know that. But then you're like, okay, so then how do you adapt your leadership style to get the most out of her, who she's a 2 on the Enneagram. She puts everybody else first. But man, she's a hard worker and she's willing to do what's needed. How do you adjust your in your face style to not really offend her and turn her off? How do you adjust your style? This guy who's really analytical, how do you adjust your style to reach out to him and connect emotionally with him? So a little plug for the Enneagram. I finished the book like 85%, 90% of Blindspots. And then I discovered the Enneagram. And I said, I don't know if I can say this, but I'll say it anyway. Holy shit. I wish I would have known about that, because it's a phenomenal tool. People throw it in with Myers-Briggs and all of these other PDP kind of tools. They all have some value. The good ones all have some value. The Enneagram is a phenomenal tool to help you look inside. And so I make it part of my coaching. I make people, after I sell them on it, I make them take the Enneagram test, which isn't some truth serum, but it's a starting point.
Yeah.
It
Well,
suggests that you are such and such type of person. Let's continue that dialogue if you're okay. Because we're going to
and it
talk about,
also makes you remember that not everybody thinks your way. And if they don't think your way, that's okay. And the likelihood of you changing them is pretty small, but the likelihood of them wanting to change and fix something is higher.
and the likelihood of them changing you is also small, right?
Yeah.
Because we're wired. I don't have to think about being competitive. It's like breathing. And my wife, who puts everybody else before herself, doesn't have to think about that. It's like breathing to her. Okay. But both of us get into trouble in our own unique ways when we take that innate set of characteristics of ours too far.
Yeah.
She becomes resentful of people she puts before herself, ironically, right? When they don't start to affirm her.
Yeah.
My competitiveness turns ugly when, in a personal matter, right? Playing cards at home. I mean, I'm sorry.
You win.
It's hard for me to dial it down, right? Dad, take it easy. It's just a game of euchre, right? No, it's not, right? So it is. It's about self. I saw a study here on my desk, a study that a consulting company did recently, Green Peak Partners. They talked about how the top traits of CEOs that they studied, the top traits, a high level of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got a lot of clients that don't have a high level of self-awareness. And what it looks like is saying something that they shouldn't have said. There was a much better way, or not saying something that they should have said that would have made that emotional connection. So that's what I'm trying to do with clients is blind spots, make them aware. You got something called blind spots. It gets in the way of you becoming a more effective coach and leader. And I've got a plan that we can work on to help you be that more effective leader and coach that you want to be.
And how do you do it without making people think that they're bad or that they're broken or that they're inferior or they're flawed, and just that you're human and that we can't we all have blind spots. Some might be gaping, others may be minor. And
Yes.
and I think everybody wants to be better. I don't think if you asked anybody, oh, I'm perfect, thank you.
Right.
Thanks for checking.
And they try to get better the only way they know how. They double down on
On
the
what they're
things that
good
have
at.
gotten them better before. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was doubling down in
Competitive.
pursuing, the world domination of funnel principle, right? And growing my empire. Okay. The only way I knew how: work harder, spend more time in the office, travel more, make more calls, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't see what was happening back at home. But I also didn't see what's happening, in my community. I mean, I didn't have time for service. So I think how I help people become aware of this and to realize you're not a bad person is when I go first. In this, I credit this to Mike Bosworth. He taught us in this class. When you go first, it has an incredible impact on people. Meaning, when you are vulnerable, you're more likely to get somebody that you're talking to, for them to somehow be more vulnerable too, because you just made it safe to be vulnerable. So that's one thing. So leaders, and studies are showing this: more humble, more vulnerable, you're more powerful. You have more influence. Okay, so that's one way. I use the Enneagram tool to show people that you're wired. You're wired, and you can't rewire yourself. That doesn't mean you can't change. It just means that your innate motivations drive certain behaviors. And sometimes those behaviors are beautiful. If you're a great organizer, a leader, we've all been in those meetings where it's like, perfect. I know the purpose. I know why we're here. And Jane keeps it on track, and we finished 5 minutes early, right? And we've all been in those meetings so somebody who doesn't have a good skill set of organizing a meeting and keeping it on track doesn't make them a bad person, but they need to be aware that that's happening. So we expose their natural abilities and innate characteristics and say, that's beautiful. It's beautiful when you do this. Here's where it's not beautiful. Here's where the competitiveness is ugly. Yeah. Here's where the putting everybody putting everybody in front of you, it turns to resentment because you're tired of putting everybody in front of you and they're not affirming that you're doing that. So when you put it that way, and my clients, they're like, that makes sense. Yeah. So that's what we're doing.
Now tell us about the book. How'd you structure it? And if people read it, how do they leverage it? And what would they get out of it?
Okay, thank you. So I hired a copy editor, as any author needs to do. And she said, Mark, there's still a little bit of the buy cycle funnel, which comes out of the funnel principle book. There's still a little bit of that, like 2 chapters. And she rearranged chapters to say, Mark, the story of your book is this personal story that's the nugget. So we put all that up front, and I call it getting in your own way. Okay. So we don't know, we get in our own way. So I tell people, opening chapter, you get in your own way. Let me tell you what that looks like, right? You say things you shouldn't say. You don't say things that you should say, blah, 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 right? So then how do you get out of your own way? So let's talk about how do you get out of your own way. Another chapter, how do you stay out of your own way? Okay, so got awareness. I find myself catching myself, but you know what? Frankly, it's a lifelong journey. So how do I get on that lifelong journey plan to continue to be the great sales coach and leader that I need to be, right? So basically it's structured, awareness, why that's happening, and what you can do about it. So I think people reading it, what they'll get out of it is, I think they'll see a successful guy who has basically said, I'm pouring out my soul. I hit bottom. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing that ever happened to me, right? So let me tell you my story. People love stories. I've got a lot of stories about people who have blind spots, and everybody's hidden. Nobody knows who I'm talking about, but it's, I'm just telling the stories that I've picked up over the years. So they'll read stories. They'll have a lot of examples. They'll have specific things they can do. Stop judging people. Stop trying to fix your salespeople. You can't fix them. Stop trying to do that. Connect with them, step back, understand, listen better, be more observant, blah, blah, blah. So they'll pick up some ideas for how to leverage this concept of blind spots to be a more effective coach and leader.
Cool. And just pick it up on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, yes. We have a Kindle version. We have the hard cover version. It's actually a soft cover. And we will hopefully, maybe by the end of the year, we'll have an audio version too.
Cool. And where can people go to follow you?
www.breakthrough-sales.com. I'm putting a lot of stuff out on LinkedIn, tips and things. We also have a blog called blindspotsinSales.blog. So I'm really socializing the idea on that. And you might find me in an airport somewhere too.